Right now, on a stretch of highway in Europe, a crew is pouring concrete, mixed to a recipe that was written down before the birth of Christ. They're doing it on purpose. Because on a coast somewhere in America, there's a concrete pier with rust stains bleeding down its sides and chunks of its underside lying on the seabed. It went up in the 1970s. It's already finished. The steel buried inside it is corroding, and rust swells to many times the volume of the metal it ate, so the reinforcement that was supposed to hold that pier together is quietly prying it apart from the inside. In the Bay of Naples, a Roman pier sits in the same salt water, doing the same job. It's been there for 2,000 years. Nobody has ever patched it, and our concrete is stronger than theirs. Put a modern cylinder and a Roman one in a press, and ours takes more load before it breaks. We win the test. Ours is the one that's dead in 50 years. The Romans didn't beat us with chemistry. They didn't know what a molecule was. What they had was a volcano. In the Bay of Naples, near Vesuvius, the ground is full of a gritty volcanic ash that does something ordinary sand won't. Stir it into lime and water, and it doesn't just dry, it reacts, locking into a stone that sets even underwater. The Romans found it around the town of Puteoli, which is why we still call the stuff pozzolana today, and they wrote the recipe down. An architect named Vitruvius put it in a book in the 1st century BC, right down to the ratios for work under the sea, 1 part lime to 2 parts of the ash. Pliny the Elder raved about the same material a few decades later, amazed that the moment it touched seawater, it became a single mass of stone the waves couldn't break. Then they went and proved it in a way we still can't match. Walk into the Pantheon in Rome, and the ceiling over your head is a dome of unreinforced concrete, 142 feet across, poured around the year 128, holding itself up with no steel anywhere in it. 19 centuries later, it's still the largest unreinforced concrete dome on the planet. Nobody has built a bigger one. Not because we can't afford to, but because we stopped building that way at all. And the Romans got it up there by cheating gravity with the recipe itself. Heavy rock, down low, where the loads are brutal. Then lighter and lighter as the dome climbs, until near the top they're mixing in pumice, a volcanic froth so full of trapped gas that it floats on water. Then they left a 27-foot hole open in the very center because the crown of a dome is where the weight hurts most, and the cheapest way to carry weight is to not have any. So for a couple of centuries, the answer looked obvious. It's the ash. Get the volcanic ash and you get the Roman result. Except that when people mixed the ash the way the books described, they got good concrete, not immortal concrete. Something in the Roman samples was still unaccounted for. And it was sitting there in plain view the whole time, in every piece of Roman wall anyone had ever put under a microscope. Ignored, because it looked like evidence that the Romans were bad at their jobs. The samples are freckled with little white lumps, chalky specks of lime, no bigger than a grain of salt scattered all through the stone. And the textbook read on them was unanimous and slightly condescending. Sloppy work, bad quality control. Somebody didn't stir the batch properly, or the raw material was junk. For generations, that's what those specks were. The flaws, the places where the greatest builders of the ancient world got careless. Admir Masick, a materials scientist at MIT, looked at that explanation and found it ridiculous. These are the people who put a dome over Rome that we still haven't beaten. They ran an empire on this material, and we think the one thing they couldn't manage was mixing? So his team went at the specks directly, and what they found rewrote the whole recipe. The Romans weren't using lime the way we assumed. To make lime, you roast limestone in a kiln at around 1650 degrees, and it comes out as quicklime, a substance so hungry for water that it hisses and cooks when it meets it. Everyone assumed the Romans tamed that first, quenched it into a safe paste, and then mixed. The evidence says they didn't. They threw the quicklime in raw and let the whole batch cook itself. It's called hot mixing, and it puts the mortar through temperatures and reactions that a cold, tame mix can never reach. That's what leaves the white specks behind. They aren't leftovers from a bad day. They're what the process is for. And what they are is a repair kit buried in the wall, waiting. The mechanism is beautiful. Those specks are brittle. They're the weak point in the stone. So when a crack starts working its way through a Roman wall, it doesn't avoid them, it seeks them out. The way a tear in fabric runs to the loose thread. The crack finds a speck and splits it open. Then the first rain gets in, or the first splash of seawater, and it dissolves that cracked open lime into a calcium-loaded solution that runs straight down the fracture and hardens there, growing new stone across the gap and welding it shut. The damage triggers its own cure. Every one of those little white flaws is a dose of medicine sealed in the wall, doing nothing at all for 2,000 years, until the day something breaks near it. Massic's team tested it the only way that counts. They mixed 2 batches, one hot mixed the Roman way with quicklime. One made the modern way without it. Then they deliberately cracked both and ran water through the cracks. In the Roman-style sample, the crack sealed itself completely within 2 weeks, and the water stopped coming through. In the modern one, the water just kept running. It ran, and it was never going to stop because there was nothing in that concrete with any interest in healing. And that's only the half of it that happens on dry land. Back at those piers in Naples, a geologist named Marie Jackson pulled cores from Roman marine concrete and found something that turns a fundamental rule of civil engineering upside down. To us, seawater is the enemy. Salt is what drives chlorides into a pier, wrecks the steel, and condemns the structure. In Roman concrete, seawater is an ingredient. It filters through the stone, dissolves the volcanic ash, and out of that chemistry, new crystals start to grow inside the material. Rare minerals with names like aluminous tobermorite and philipsite, growing in flat, interlocking plates that knit through the matrix and make it harder to fracture. They keep growing for centuries. The ocean that's chewing our pier apart has spent 2 millennia making theirs tougher. That's why nobody's ever repaired it. It never asked. So you go looking for the villain. Who buried this? Who profited from us forgetting? And the honest answer is nobody, which is stranger and worse. Nothing was lost. Vitruvius never went missing. His book has been in print in English for centuries. Any engineer could have read the recipe on a lunch break. We didn't forget Roman concrete. We looked straight at it and chose against it. Because Roman concrete has a hard limit. It's strong when you squeeze it and useless when you pull it. That's why Rome is all arches and vaults and domes. Those shapes exist to keep every ounce of the building in compression, because the moment you ask that stone to stretch, it snaps. Then we did something Rome never managed. We buried steel bars in the concrete, and the steel takes the pulling. Suddenly, you don't need the arch. You can pour a flat floor, a cantilever, a bridge deck, a parking garage, a thin shell that hangs out over nothing. Rebar bought us every shape the Romans couldn't build. And rebar is the poison. Steel only survives in there because fresh concrete is fiercely alkaline, which keeps it from rusting. But carbon dioxide from ordinary air seeps in year after year and neutralizes that alkalinity. And once the chemistry tips, the bars start to corrode and swell and split the structure open from the inside. We didn't trade away durability by mistake. We traded it deliberately for freedom of shape, and the price on the receipt was 2,000 years. There was a second thing on that receipt, and it's the one now driving this back into the news. Concrete is the most used substance on Earth after water. We pour something like 4.5 billion tons of it a year, heading for 5.5 billion by 2050. And making the cement for it is responsible for roughly 8% of all human carbon emissions. Worse, you can't clean most of that up with better fuel, because the carbon isn't only coming from the fire, it's coming out of the limestone itself. Cooking it into cement chemically releases CO2 by definition, no matter how green the kiln is. So every time a pier dies at 50 and gets torn out and poured again, we don't just pay the money twice, we pay that carbon again. Which quietly makes lifespan a climate technology. A structure that lasts twice as long is a structure you only have to emit once. That math is why Massic didn't stop at publishing the paper. He co-founded a company called DMAT to sell the Roman idea as a real product, an additive that puts those self-healing specks into modern concrete. It's already certified in Europe, it's already gone into highway infrastructure and precast concrete work, with claims of roughly double the service life and up to 60% less CO2. And in October of 2025, the company raised $4.5 million, led by an Italian climate fund, specifically to switch on production in the United States. So the pier rotting off the American coast and the fix for it are now on the same continent. None of which would mean much if it were only a laboratory result, but there's a working proof of it that predates the experiment by 2 millennia. And it isn't in a museum. Rome still drinks from its aqueducts. Water is moving through Roman stonework and pouring out of fountains in a modern European capital this morning, for a city that hadn't been imagined when it was poured.